Welcome to Be Home Resources, a place you can depend on for all of your home ownership needs. My name is Kathleen, your real estate concierge, and I'm excited to share with you how to maintain, update, and protect your investment. Today I have a special guest. We spend a lot of time and money on purchasing and fixing up our homes, and yet sometimes we fail to protect the ownership of it. So my guest today is Ashley Dotchin. Did I get that right?
You did.
Oh, good. And your focus is on life and legacy planning. So you're an estate attorney, and this is a topic no one wants to talk about.
Nobody.
No. So, what is your main goal when you actually meet with someone? What is the focus?
Yeah, so the main goal when I first meet somebody is to focus on educating them rather than trying to sell them on something that they probably need, but they're not there yet. So we want to make sure that they have the information available to make informed decisions that are right for them and their family.
Yeah, so when we talk about estate planning, what does that encompass? Let's just get down to basics.
Yeah, so an estate plan, a lot of people will think about their will. Sometimes people will think about a trust because they've heard that before, but it kind of encompasses everything that you own and what you want to leave behind. So usually you'll have a will, a trust, healthcare proxies, powers of attorney, and if you have minor kids, then a kids protection plan is really important as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when should we actually begin estate planning? Is there an age or?
So really, once you turn 18, your parents aren't able to do a lot of the things that they were able to before, and most people don't realize that. So once your child goes off to college, they're a legal adult. So if something happens, you're not able to make their medical decisions anymore. You're not able to make their financial decisions for them. So really, 18 is a great time to start at least getting some of the basic documents. You don't really need, necessarily a trust at that point, but just, basic healthcare documents and powers of attorney. And then really anytime you have a big life change, you move, you buy a house, you sell a house, you have a baby, you get married, you can update it along the way and you can always add pieces to it.
Yeah, I know personally, and for many of the clients that we work with, they don't begin this process early enough. And what's interesting is there's so much happening when a child is going off to college that this is probably not really one of the things they think about.
No, it's really not. A lot of the parents that we talk to that have kids going off to college, they're focused on, what do they need to bring with them to move in? What do they need to, make sure they have if they're going long distance? But they rarely think about the other piece just because
the what ifs.
They've always made those decisions. A lot of them don't realize that they can't anymore. So it's just not common knowledge for a lot of people.
So what is the first step in estate planning? How does one get started?
Yeah, so typically what I like to do is schedule a phone call and get to know you, explain the process a little bit. But during that first meeting, I usually block off about 2 hours and we'll go through what assets you own, what would happen to those assets if something happened to you tomorrow, see what you like about that and what you don't like about it. Usually there's quite a bit that people don't like about Massachusetts law. And so from there we can see, what it is that we need to change, what we need to put in place and start designing to make sure that your plan actually fits your life and what you need it to do. Yeah,
and I think most people, at least for me, as well as for many of my friends and family, is this becomes a, oh crap plan, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Something in your life happens that highlights, I don't have a medical directive. I don't have any of these things in place.
Yeah.
And so the surprises are probably more painful.
Yeah, and sometimes, if you wait too long, it can be too late to do the documents. Once somebody gets dementia or for some other reason they're not able to communicate to make those decisions, at that point, that's when you have to ask a court to step in and intervene, and you have to actually get their approval to make decisions, which can be time consuming. It can be costly, even when it's not something that you have a group of family members fighting over. It's just you're on the court's timeline at that point.
Yeah, and being in real estate, I've been on the other side of that, where families are at odds as to what is the best practice for mom or dad, because there was nothing written.
Exactly.
And then the court now has that burden of trying to help the family.
Exactly, yeah. And I've talked to a couple of people recently that have said, oh, I didn't do a healthcare proxy and I was in the hospital and didn't realize that it's not my husband or it's not my wife that makes those decisions. So people just assume if they're married, it's the other spouse that gets to step in. And
Right. But we have blended families now.
Right.
And yeah. So I was reading online, there are like 5 components of estate planning, and you and I both know that. I've been through this process. So, and after all these years in the real estate industry, I was in the knowledge I thought I had about estate planning was far more intense. But there are 5 components to estate planning, to my knowledge. And what are those, and how do they interact?
So usually you get a trust. You don't have to, but they're pretty common, especially nowadays. And what that does is it bypasses probate. It typically saves parents and families about 5% of the total value of assets that they would spend if they had to go through probate court. And even when you do a trust, you want to make sure that you have a will. It's called a pour-over will. And it is there kind of as a safety net. So if for some reason one of your assets doesn't make it into the trust, then you have this will that lets the court know you have the trust, it exists, and how to get that asset, through probate as quickly as possible. You also want to make sure that you have powers of attorney, naming somebody to make financial decisions for you if you can't. Healthcare documents to make sure that you're naming the people you want to make sure that your healthcare decisions would always be followed to the best of their knowledge of what you'd want. And then make sure you update beneficiary designations once you have your trust so everything goes to the right place. And then that kid's
That was a
protection
big
plan.
surprise for me, and I still need to follow that through.
Yeah, it's a lot for a lot of people.
Because when you start a bank account, you list a beneficiary. When
Right.
your insurance policy has a beneficiary. So everything your assets have beneficiaries, and if they're not all in alignment and you've not
Right.
updated them.
Right, and a lot of people forget about them. They'll switch jobs, they'll have kids, they'll, have these life changes, but they set up the account so long ago, especially if they're working for the same company that they've been working for 20 years. They set up the beneficiary designation probably when they started and then haven't looked at it
Or
since.
they've had a divorce and never updated.
Exactly.
Yikes. So I still had trouble understanding the difference between a trust and a will. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a will for a while was the most common document. What it does is when you pass away, it tells the court who you want to get your assets, where you want your money to go. If you have somebody under 18, who's going to manage that money for them until the person under 18 reaches 18. And it typically, when it goes through the probate process, it can take about 9 months to a year. It can take longer in certain situations, but usually about a year. And it typically in Massachusetts will cost about 5% of the value of the assets. So it's
really
pretty
because
costly.
of the process.
Exactly. So it's things like, court costs, attorney's fees, paying any creditors that are owed money, because creditors always get paid out first before the heirs to your property. So the heirs will usually then, depending on how you have it split, they'll get whatever's left after all those costs are paid out. But with the trust, there's a couple different kinds, but the most common one is the revocable trust, which means that you maintain control of your assets. You still get to use them the way that you want to, but it bypasses the probate process. So there's, no time frame for waiting for those assets to become available. They'd be available right away. Yeah. But then it also gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you want because there is no court involvement. So you're not going to have to worry about, paying those creditors first. The money's going to go to the people that you want it to go to right away.
So that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. So it typically will save, quite a bit of money in the long run.
Yeah. And I know, being in real estate, that we tend to see houses being put into trusts. What are the benefits of that?
So the benefit of putting your house in a trust is that if it's in the trust, it's not going to go through probate. Anything that has a joint owner typically won't go through probate anyway. And a lot of times with real estate, if a husband and wife buy it, they're going to both be on the deed anyway. The
Right.
issue is if somebody passes away and they don't update the deed, then you have a situation where when the second spouse passes away, it's going to go through probate. Or if you're single and you pass away, it's going to go through probate. So by putting that asset into your trust, then you're making sure that you're naming the people that are going to get it, and it's in the name of the trust, so there's no court involvement at that point.
Yeah, so that's a very important factor, especially in today's world. We're living longer, and then we have, we're going sometimes into situations where we need, medical care and live in a facility and that kind of thing.
And your house is usually, your
Your
largest
greatest.
asset.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
especially with housing prices lately.
Especially today, yes. So what are, the other topic that gets me all the time is the different kinds of power of attorneys. So can we kind of review how that works and how it extends out? The different kinds.
So you can have what's called a general durable power of attorney, where it's good for anything you would normally do for yourself, and you pick the person that you trust to make those financial decisions for you. So they can do things like go to the bank, pay your taxes, deal with any real estate that you own, anything that you would normally be able to do yourself. And you can have it so that it's set up so it's valid as soon as you sign it. They're able to use it. They don't have to do anything, which is kind of convenient for some people, especially if they're married and they want their spouse to be able to do things. The other option would be to have it so that it's valid only once you're incapacitated. So at that point, if somebody wanted to use it, they'd have to get a note from the doctor. They'd have to make sure that you actually are incapacitated at that point before they're able to make any of those decisions for you. And then if you don't want to go the durable power of attorney route, you can have just specific powers of attorney, so just a specific thing that they're allowed to do, which will come up sometimes when you're buying or selling a house. You might give your lawyer or your real estate agent the power to sign your closing documents for you if you can't be there.
Right, yeah, and we see that all the time.
Yeah.
Sellers don't typically like to go to closings anymore. They just kind of pass it along.
Exactly.
Also with children sometimes too, when you have disabled children.
Exactly. If you have disabled children, a power of attorney can be really important to be able to continue to make those decisions for them once they turn 18, to make sure that you're still able to help with finances, you're still able to make medical decisions that may come up, and to really make sure that you're able to continue to guide them through their lifetime instead of having to, rely on somebody else to do it or get permission from, a court to be able to do it.
Right. Do you have any suggestions or tips for parents or homeowners today?
Yeah.
With regard to this topic?
Yeah, I think, if you're a homeowner, it's really important to have that power of attorney, whether it's just a specific one or a general durable power of attorney. I personally like the general durable one because it covers everything. So if for some reason you just are worried about the house now, but in 10 years you might be worried about other things, but you forgot to update it or you don't remember what exactly you signed, if it's the general durable power of attorney, it's good no matter what. If it's the specific one, it can get a little complicated, but it's great because in an emergency situation, if you're not planning on it and for some reason you can't be there to keep up with the house or maintain the house, make sure bills are getting paid, the mortgage, taxes, things like that, then you have somebody that you trust, that you've appointed, that's able to step in and help you along the way.
Yeah, and that just personally happened to me with my parents. Mom's not as efficient with the finances, and my stepdad became incapacitated, so it was me stepping in.
Yeah, and it's hard to do, mentally, so it's
yeah.
nice when you have the documents already in place, and it's one less mental
I can't even tell you how many
stressor.
people said to me, well, I can't talk to you unless we have a power of attorney, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of these documents can live independently, correct? So trust, will.
Exactly. Yep. The will, a lot of people don't realize, only comes into play, once you've passed away. So for a while, people would name guardians in the will.
Yeah.
But if you're in the hospital, but if you haven't passed away at that point, you're going to recover. You're going to be just fine. They're not going to look at that for things like guardianship. So
that would be the trust.
Yeah, so it's the trust or, separate documents outside of both of those that will say, if I'm incapacitated short term, here's who I trust to take the kids. If I'm going to be incapacitated or I pass away and it's going to be, a long-term situation, here's the people that I trust to take them.
Right, right. Now I know I'm in my upper years. It took me a long time to find an attorney, an estate attorney that I wanted to work with. And being in the industry, I've met a lot of them. And not that they were bad or good or anything. It was just it's a personal decision. And I know personally why I chose you and why I felt you were different when we met. But how do your services differ from other estate planning attorneys out there?
Yeah, so
Because you have a story.
Yeah, I actually, I got into estate planning because I watched my family go through the process. My grandmother passed away, but before that happened, my grandfather had a stroke when I was about 10. He never fully recovered, so my grandmother was taking care of him. She was trying her best to keep him at home as long as possible. He did eventually end up going into a nursing home. They did his estate planning, she did her estate planning. They went through probate when he passed away, thought everything was fine. And then when my grandmother passed away, come to find out, she missed a life insurance policy. And he only had her as the beneficiary. He didn't have a backup beneficiary. So there's nobody to give that money to. So it's still sitting in the unclaimed property division because there's nobody to give it
Those
to.
commercials that you see, like, well, you have
Find
unclaimed
mass
money.
money. Yeah, and there's over $3 billion there right now because either somebody passed away or somebody forgot about it. So if you haven't checked findmassmoney.com, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
But I realized during that process of watching them that really there's a better way to do it, versus giving somebody a set of documents, not building a relationship where you're going to follow up with them and make sure that as their life changes, their documents are going to continue to work for them. Because, life does, it changes. And so every 3 years, you want to make sure that you're staying up to date on it, that you're having it at least reviewed to make sure that nothing changes. But what I like to do is give everybody an asset list, so I know, where all the bank statement or where all the bank accounts are, where retirement accounts are, life insurance policies, so that when something happens eventually, we know where everything is.
Right.
We can easily go find it. We can make sure that nothing gets lost, which a lot of people don't do, although I think it's starting to become a little bit more common.
Yeah, I'm mad at myself because I went through the process with you, which was painless, really. And I got this really cool package in the mail with all the documents, extremely organized, tabs for everything. And I meant to bring it today just to do a little show and tell. But I was so impressed with the way in which you created an experience that I have a disabled husband. So you made it so easy for him. And so you are different, and I think your services are well worth talking about. So I'm so happy that you joined me today and I was able to share you with our viewers.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I want to thank you also today for joining us. And if you have ideas or topics for us or any questions about your home or Ashley, please email us at our email address on the screen. We want to earn the right to be your real estate concierge. So I also invite you to join our Facebook page called Be Home Resources. Again, I'm Kathleen Gano, and I'm signing off for today. Be well and live well.